Hey
Okay.
guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad that you're here today. I have a very special guest. Mark is a CPA and he specializes in helping resellers with their taxes. He has a full reseller tax guide linked in my description, all about how to handle your taxes when you are a reseller, an entrepreneur, you do your own thing. It can be really overwhelming, and his guide takes you step by step through everything. He's going to be answering some of your most frequently asked questions today on this stream, but you guys are welcome to learn more through his tax guide below. Mark, welcome to the channel. So good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be back. Talk about all the good stuff.
Oh, it's the best. I mean, everyone needs to know about taxes. I know it might make people uncomfy. It's not the most fun and thrilling thing, but we have to know it for our business. It's so important. It's the cornerstone. If your finances and your taxes are not managed well, your business will fall apart. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's definitely the foundation. Yeah, you're not going to have your taxes are not going to be optimized, or you're not going to get the most tax savings if you don't have good records, good bookkeeping. So it all just sort of builds on each other and goes together.
Absolutely. And people that I know have quit doing this because it was such a mess come tax time. It was like PTSD. They couldn't do it again and they just said I'm done. I can't do this. So, if you have all of your ducks in a row and you get everything organized, it's actually pretty straightforward and pretty easy. And that's something that my husband and I have done thanks to your guide and thanks to your expertise. Our taxes are done very early on every year. I was just telling Mark before the stream, we're done with our taxes this year. I mean, it's that easy because we just know it inside and out. So, why don't you introduce yourself, Mark, and tell us about your background and how you came to specialize in reseller taxes?
I never wanted to be like the traditional accountant who majored in accounting and then eventually just opened their own CPA firm or whatever. Like I just thought that was so, just like unoriginal. But yeah, I went into public accounting. I worked in corporate finance for a while. But eventually I was like, I'm a CPA. I've done a little bit of tax at my job. So why not just try it, see if I like it? So, my mom put out a message on Facebook. I got a few tax clients that first year, and it grew a little bit, and eventually just I started hearing about people making money selling stuff online. Like my friend's brother-in-law was making like $6,000 a month on Amazon selling swim caps. I was like, oh man. And at the same time I got like one or two clients just by chance who were selling online, Amazon and eBay. And then from those people I got referrals, and just after a while I was like, man, I think I'm just going to specialize in this thing. And that's about the same time that I started selling on Amazon. And yeah, it's just grown from there. And I still think it's a huge opportunity. And there's tons of new people just coming into it all the time.
For sure. It's a really special niche of people that you get to help who are, I think, especially lost when it comes to taxes and preparing your finances because there's like a million different rumors floating around, things that people don't understand. What would you say if someone is just starting out? I'm checking out some questions I have here. Someone's just starting out with reselling. What are the first steps they should take to be organized financially speaking?
Yeah, and I feel like that's such a big portion of the population of sellers out there, or resellers. Are a lot of them are beginners or consider themselves beginners, because I'd say for most it's the first type of self-employment that they've had. A lot of people are working a full-time job or a part-time job, and then they want to make a little bit of money on the side, or just sell stuff for fun. And then all of a sudden, they have tax implications that they haven't dealt with before. One of the best things you can do in the beginning is just make sure you are, again, tracking your numbers, that you have some type of record of your sales, a record of the different expenses that you're incurring. And the easiest way to do that, the starting point for that is I think it's to open up a separate bank account, just so you have all that stuff separate from your personal transactions. Like even if you're not using like an official bookkeeping system, you can always go back and you'll have all those numbers there isolated that you can at least, organize and do your taxes with, and assess your own profitability and that stuff.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that we align on that because that is what I tell people whenever I'm asked to get a bank account that is separate, or else you will be crying when it comes to tax time because you're going to look at so many transactions. I mean, how many transactions do we have just in life? Like we have to go through so many things to look for. Was that, arbitrage, or was that for Christmas or birthday? I don't know. So get that separate bank account. And you're right. Like as long as you have that, And if you have like eBay, you can download those reports right through managed payments. I mean, specifically talking about eBay, they've merged to managed payments outside of PayPal. And I actually like it better because the reports are pretty straightforward. You see all the transactions, you see returns, you see shipping. So if you have those two things, you can do some puzzle piecing and figure out like things pretty easily, would you say?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, that's what I tell people. If they haven't kept any records, just start with the reporting that your platforms offer, which will usually show you a record of your sales, your total sales, your platform expenses, and then you'll just have to get any other expenses that you're paying for outside of the platform, hopefully from your bank records or maybe receipts if you're paying in cash. But usually you can put together a pretty accurate picture of the activity, the financial activity for your business for that prior year.
And the only question would be like yard sales or garage sales. You don't have receipts, you don't have bank transactions there unless you're using like Venmo. So I have had questions, people asking, what do we do with, we have a transaction that's outside of like that's just cash. And you've told me in the past, and you can elaborate if this is still true. If you come home from your garage sale, yard sale, whatever, and you just have a simple spreadsheet of I bought these items, I paid this much, average out this about this much per item, that's enough. That's enough evidence, you would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can only do so much when you're not given some type of external substantiation. You just have to create your own record in that case, which is usually just writing it down in a spreadsheet or a logbook or something like that.
And that you'd say would be like sufficient. Like you don't see that causing a lot of problems or trouble for people, right? Like they imagine it might.
Never. Yeah, I've never seen the IRS or an auditor like drill down to that level of detail, and really hammer somebody for not having a receipt for something they bought at a garage sale. Like I mean, they're people too. They're like, oh, obviously they're not going to have a receipt for anything they bought at a garage sale.
Okay, that's good to know. I think that'll ease a lot of people's minds for sure.
Yeah.
We also learned this year that companies are going to give out 1099s for any amount over $600, and it used to just be 20,000. So, can you kind of tell us why that's being implemented and what that means for us as resellers?
Yeah, I didn't think it was really that big of a deal. For the past few years, payment processors like PayPal or Amazon or eBay managed payments now are required to send out 1099s. It's called a 1099K to people who for whom they process more than $20,000 worth of transactions. Yeah, $20,000 and 200, at least 200 transactions. So if you surpass that threshold, they're going to send you a 1099, which means the IRS is also getting a copy of that. So if you don't report that income on your tax return, the IRS is going to send you a letter and say, hey, you owe this much in tax for this income that you didn't report to us. And it's going to be way higher than you owe in reality because they're not taking into account any of the deductions that you have. So that's just the threshold at which those payment processors are required to report it to the IRS. But that doesn't mean if you're below that, that your income is not taxable, right?
Right.
So basically any profit you make is going to be taxable and reportable. It's just that the IRS won't know about it unless you're exceeding that threshold. So there's a lot of people who don't meet that threshold who don't know that they owe tax on that income. And maybe some do, but they're like, oh, I can get away with it. Now, with some of the recent stimulus legislation, they reduced that from 20,000 down to $600, regardless of the amount of transactions. So that's going to probably surprise a lot of people when they get 1099s starting in early 2023
Hmm.
for 2022. And I'm like, it's not that big a deal because if you were already reporting it like you should have been, it doesn't really impact anything.
Right. Exactly.
I'm not that consistent on YouTube, but when I put out a video, it'll get like 2 or 3 thousand views. I thought this was going to be like another like normal video when I talked about this reduced threshold, and I think it's almost up to 300,000 views now because yeah,
Wow.
they're just freaking out about
That's awesome.
it.
People want to know. This is big news and they want to hear from a knowledgeable source what it all means. So I can see why it blew up for sure.
Well,
But
they're
you're
like
right.
they're like, oh no, now the IRS wants to tax our eBay income too. And I'm like, okay, it's always been taxable. Or there are people saying like, well, I'm done with eBay now. I'm done with Etsy. And I'm like, no, it's not that big a deal.
I wonder how those comments, I need to go look and read those comments, but like, is it enlightening that, wow, a lot of people were not paying taxes on their reselling hobby, because this really, yeah, like you said, this doesn't impact us at all because we were always accounting for whatever had sold. I won't make you implicate anybody, but that's the consensus that I'm getting from people, I think too, is, oh, I really gotta account for what I've got going on. No more skating, no more hiding, because the IRS will know if it's anything over $600. If you've been paying your taxes like normal, this won't affect you. It's not a big deal. If maybe you've been fudging some numbers, no more. Those days are over. I mean, and this is another question. I know you get a ton, I get a ton. Do you keep all your receipts? Must you keep all your receipts? Scan them, keep them, save them?
Yeah, it's honestly not that big a deal. I mean, for the stuff you're buying at garage sales or whatever, well, which you won't have receipts for anyway, but for the stuff you do have receipts for, yeah, in theory, you should have some type of substantiation or support for that transaction. I mean, the IRS wants you to keep that receipt. You don't have to keep the physical copy. You can scan it or take a picture and then just put it in some digital folder and forget about it. You're never going to have to look it up again, most likely.
Is a bank statement enough? Like looking up your bank transactions and seeing $200 at Savers?
I think generally it is going to be fine.
Okay,
It's not as strong of substantiation as a receipt, which has more detail on there.
sure,
Because if
right.
you buy a ton of stuff, you just can't see the detail, but it's something. And just because of the extreme low likelihood that anybody ever looks at it, I think it's typically going to be fine. And even me, like I should be, I do my books pretty regularly, but I'm not very good about attaching the receipt, in my bookkeeping software or
What?
yeah, I know. And sometimes I think I usually archive it in my email. Sometimes I probably just delete it just because it's like nobody's ever looking at that. But the IRS says you should have some type of documentation, at least maybe on your bigger purchases. Like if you buy some type of expensive machinery, yeah, sure, keep that one. But if it's like $3 shirts, like don't waste your time.
Exactly. Like if it's a big purchase order, I imagine you'll keep that anyway for your records if it's like in the thousands. But for thrift store here and there, I just don't imagine that it'll be that crucial. I think people worry, oh, I haven't kept every single receipt. It's okay. Your records for your, cost per item so that your numbers a little bit better for just like as a business owner. But the IRS isn't gonna like come after you with a microscope and
Yeah, and your CPA or tax preparer, if you use one, doesn't need them either. Like
right.
you don't have to
Ours has
provide those
never
to
asked
anybody.
for it. Yeah. She's never Mark is not my personal CPA. We can't afford him. Just kidding. We've used one for many years and she has never once asked for our receipts. So she just wants bank statements. She wants end of year bank statements. She wants the 1099s. The accrual versus cash method, something that we can talk about because I believe it's changing. Correct me if I'm wrong because I want to get this right. Before it was you count the purchase only when it sells. So like you count it as a deduction only when it sells, but now you can count it the second that you buy it. Is that right? That's the cash versus accrual. And which one would you go with? And explain that much better than I just did, please.
Yeah, historically, I mean, with regard to inventory specifically, historically, the requirement has been to deduct it when you sell it
Which is the accrual method, right?
for inventory.
For inventory,
I
yeah.
mean, because for inventory, that's always been what it is. So when people talk about cash versus accrual, they're really talking about everything besides inventory. I clarify when I'm talking about inventory, I say the cash or accrual method for inventory because in 2018 there was new legislation that sort of introduced the possibility that you could use the cash method for inventory, meaning you could deduct it when you purchased it. And I even like clarified that with like an IRS tax attorney. I was like, is that really what it means? And he's like, looks like it. You just got to kind of make your own interpretation until they come out with additional guidance. So for a couple years, that's kind of what it was. But then actually about a year ago, they came out with updated guidance. They sort of clarified it and made it a little bit less attractive, maybe. But I think it is still an option depending on what kind of inventory records you keep. And that's been like such a gray area that I've followed pretty closely. And we won't get into it too much here, but I made a video specifically about that where I go more into the detail, just because
Fascinating.
like it's so complex when I try and just talk about it like this.
I will link it in the description for sure. For anyone, I'll title it cash versus accrual or inventory method, and then I will link it in the description so people can easily access it. Because yeah, it can be a very complex issue, and it's like you said, it's a gray area. We've always done accrual method where we've only counted it as a deduction when it sells. It would be nice to know that, hey, if I buy a huge wholesale purchase end of December, I can use that as a deduction for that year. So
Yeah, and I would say if your business is pretty simple and you don't feel like you know exactly how much inventory you have, then you could probably do it. It's pretty detailed and like specific video, and I was like, this is going to be way too detailed for like my general YouTube audience. But actually, there's like a whole subset of people out there who are like, oh, this is awesome, just what I needed. Like, I'm an
yeah.
accountant and I love this video, so I don't know, maybe you'll like it. Who knows?
Oh, people will love it. And yeah, I love that there's a resource that I can give them that's, longer than it's so complex, it's hard to give in a few minutes to answer. So yeah, we'll link that below. On that same token, how would you account for, like, if I bought a pallet of stuff and it's all crap, it's just garbage and I've spent $2,000 on it. Is that a loss? How can I account for that to my best tax advantage?
I mean, yeah, if the whole thing is garbage, so you would record that $2,000 as a purchase, and then you throw it all away or donate it, and then your ending inventory, let's say, is just zero. The way the tax forms calculate your deduction is it'll take your beginning inventory plus your purchases, so 2,000 minus your ending inventory, which is zero, will end up being 2,000. It's basically just calculating your cost of goods sold. Yeah, you basically just deduct it all as cost of
Okay.
goods sold.
Business wise, it's better to get anything for it than just lose it all, right? Like, even if I can sell it for $1 per item, then I was hoping to sell for 20, that's better than just saying it's all garbage, throw it away, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you sell the whole thing for $100, you end up with $100 in your pocket rather than zero.
It's not the same as just take the loss and, oh well, it can benefit me tax wise, because it's not
Yeah,
quite like that.
either way, you get a $2,000 deduction for the cost of the stuff, and then in
Yeah.
one of those scenarios, you also have $100 in your pocket.
There you go. Okay, I love that. Yeah. So do whatever you can do to liquidate and get some money back is better than nothing, right?
Yeah,
So
because
what if you donate it?
the
Would that
deduction itself does not like neutralize the whole impact. It helps, but it doesn't leave you whole,
mm-hmm.
which makes sense when people think about it. But if they're not thinking about it, they're like, oh, a deduction is just like free money, but it's not really.
Right. And if you donate it, let's say I get video games and I donate them all. How does that help me versus just throwing them all away?
If the business is donating the inventory, it's basically the same. You
Okay.
don't get like an additional deduction in addition to the cost of goods sold. You just deduct it through as cost of goods sold.
Do it if people can benefit from it, but it's not going to help save you even more, right?
Right.
Do you have to keep an inventory spreadsheet? Mark has one, by the way, you guys, for free. You still have that, right, Mark, in your Facebook group? Okay, so if you join his Facebook group, which is also free, you can download his free inventory spreadsheet and start keeping track of all of your stuff. I mean, it's early in the year. You can get after it and get on top of it. Do you have to do that? And is it necessary for taxes?
I mean, the spreadsheet itself isn't necessarily required. If you are using the accrual method for inventory, which we've talked about, where you're deducting only what sells, you have to have some way of kind of keeping track of what the cost is of the stuff that sells. That's what my spreadsheet helps you do. That's one way you can do it, or you can make your own spreadsheet. Yeah, as long as you have some way of determining your cost of goods sold or your ending inventory, whether or not you use a spreadsheet, it's up to you.
It's good business practice, like, as a, if you think of yourself as a business owner, to know your numbers and to know, wow, this is one of the only ways that I learned certain aspects of my business just were not working and were not as profitable as they looked on paper. Like, the numbers don't lie. And like, if you have those records and you're saying, wow, I'm spending a lot, and after subscription fees and virtual assistant fees and selling fees and everything else, like, you're not really making much money. It's just good to look at and see. So I think it's recommended, but yeah, required for taxes, probably not. Quarterly tax estimates, who has to pay those and when?
If you make over a certain amount, then the IRS wants you to pay the tax that you're going to owe throughout the year rather than all at the end.
Right.
So the main rule is that if you're going to owe over $1,000 at the end of the year, then they want you to pay that quarterly. But there are some exceptions to that. So The exception is if you've already paid an amount equal to your tax liability from the prior year. So like if this year I've already paid in or had withheld from my W-2 paychecks an amount equal to last year's tax liability, then I'm not required to make any additional payments. I still might owe tax at the end of the year, but I'm just not required to pay it throughout the year. Usually if it's your first year of business, you typically don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
If it's your second or third year, it's just something to look at. I mean, it's something you can figure out pretty easily by looking at your last year tax return and maybe using a simple tax calculator online.
Right. And those are for, like, we're talking about federal tax, quarterly tax estimates, right? And then that's different from sales tax that you pay every quarter as well, right? At least I let my CPA know how many sales I had here in Utah. This is where my business is located that quarter. So that's different from what we just talked about with quarterly federal tax estimates, right?
Yes, the quarterly, typically federal, is your federal income taxes. Some states might also require quarterly state income taxes, but then yes, sales tax is completely different, which is also paid just at the state level.
Yeah.
And you only have to worry about sales tax if you're actually registered, if you have a sales tax permit or a sales tax license, which you do.
Right.
So they require you to file your sales tax returns quarterly. But for most people now, they're probably not registered for sales tax, and they don't necessarily need to because the platforms are collecting that for us now. But
Right.
but sometimes people don't want to pay sales tax on their inventory purchases. So
Yeah.
if you want to be exempt from that, if you're working with certain vendors or wholesalers, then you have to register for a sales tax permit so you can get a reseller certificate, which is the thing that exempts you. But then once you're registered for sales tax, the state's going to say, hey, you have to file sales tax returns. And even though eBay or whoever is the one collecting it, it doesn't really make sense, but it's just something that you have to do right now.
What? Something doesn't make sense? No, I have saved thousands of dollars though by having a sales tax permit. And I would recommend doing that because especially as you start ordering from, larger quantities from vendors, you're going to want that. It's just an extra hit. You shouldn't have to pay sales tax on that stuff, because they're not going to be using it for yourself. You're going to be selling it. So definitely go get it, pull a report, and then just see how many people purchase things and how much it added up to in Utah, which is usually not that many.
Right.
And that's that. On that token, because I think we should talk about, like, if this sounds overwhelming at all, you guys need to, number one, download Mark's guide and go through it. You need to educate yourselves on all of this stuff. It's just so good to build that foundation of your business really solidly and just know it backwards and forwards, because your business, like we said earlier, will fall apart if you don't have a good foundation with your money and knowing how taxes work and what you're going to be collecting, what you need to submit every quarter. It can get overwhelming. If you want to hire a CPA to help you with all this stuff, can you tell us, what do CPAs generally charge for filing taxes? Are you open to new clients, I should say? And what's a good range for what someone should pay versus, like, what's a ridiculous amount that someone could be quoted for a CPA? That's something. Can you tell us, this is a TJ question? This is my husband's question. He's like, what is outrageous and what's normal?
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem telling people what I typically charge, but it seems like there's such a big range. It's also going to depend on where you are. At Los Angeles, CPA firms are going to be a lot more expensive than, one in Montana or something. But it's crazy. So I'm part of like a couple CPA groups of CPAs, and sometimes people will come on there, or CPAs will come on and be like, hey, what do all you guys charge? And people get on there and they're like, oh, we don't accept anything less than $1,000 for a basic tax return. I'm like, okay, I mean, that's just ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, I think typically for like the typical person watching this who has, maybe a W-2 job or maybe two interest forms or whatever, a mortgage form, and then like a reselling side business, maybe that's part-time, maybe it's full-time, so that they would have a Schedule C typically on their individual tax return. I think an average that's going to run anywhere from like 350, maybe kind of at the lower end, up to like 600, kind of in there. I'm sort of in the middle of that range.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's completely, I mean, number one, so worth it. It gives you peace of mind and it helps you throughout the process, because it can be a little bit overwhelming. And it's just nice. I mean, our CPA, does all of our taxes. So she does mine, she handles TJ's, she handles all of his questions, she handles mortgage, everything. And she's found deductions for us that we didn't know existed. So it's been really, really worth it because of that. Like, I mean, your expertise helps people save a bunch of money more so than they like. It's worth the payment because they're saving more. I would say definitely go for it. Kind of like using a realtor will help you get more for your house. I mean, I don't know if that's applicable now with such a crazy housing market, but it's worth it to use a professional, help you find extra deductions and give you that peace of mind. So I would highly recommend it, especially when your business gets to a certain point. Our CPA said we were at this threshold where being an S corp would save us money, and I wouldn't have known otherwise, or I would have been afraid to take that step and file those forms without her. So it's just good to have someone kind of hold your hand. Have you ever heard of a reseller being audited, and what was that like, and is it a common problem?
I do hundreds of tax returns every year. And in the past few years, I've only ever had one client who's been audited. And it was from a return that was done before he was my client. He did not have particularly clean records, but he did get like officially audited. But when they audit you, like nobody's coming to your house, nobody's like, diving through your whole entire business. They're usually just like piecemeal audits. So they send you a letter, they say, "Hey, you've been selected for an audit. We want to look at your mileage and your cost of goods sold. Can you
Okay.
send us, a detail that supports this number that you claimed on your tax return?" And he's like, I don't have that." And I was like, "Well, do your best to like recreate it." They'll just go back and forth with you by mail. And yeah, I mean, he sent them some support that he put together, and that was it. I mean, it's not nearly as painful and yeah, whatever as people think.
Scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not digging through your shoe boxes. "Where is this receipt?" Yeah, it's like over the phone. And was there anything that, like, what was the I mean, I guess you can't go into detail. Like, what was there, like a red flag that made him or her be audited?
Sometimes there might be, maybe they see a number that's outside the normal range, but tip a lot of times it's just random. Like I imagine his was just he was just randomly selected.
Okay. Oh, it's
Some people think if they take the home office deduction, they're gonna be flagged for an audit, but that's sort of a myth.
okay.
Like everybody, especially with COVID, like who's doing a side hustle, almost there's gonna be so many people who qualify for the home office deduction. It's just, so common now. It's not a red flag. Just take all those deductions.
Definitely. And all your mileage, don't be afraid to take that mileage. If we're driving a lot as resellers often, and take that mileage, deduct all of it. Those aren't going to trigger the IRS to come after you. It sounds like it's a lottery. No one wants to win, though, to be audited at random. What is the biggest mistake you see resellers making with their taxes most commonly?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably just not keeping good records. During tax season, I'm doing a ton of tax preparation, but I get a lot of people coming to me asking, like, how do I get this number? How do I get my sales? How do I do this? How do I do this? Trying to hire me as a bookkeeper to put together all their numbers. And I have to explain, well, I'm actually doing tax preparation. Bookkeeping's a whole separate thing, which I
Right.
don't do a lot of at this time of year. But, I try to point them to the right reports and stuff. But if that type of thing can be avoided, that's going to be ideal.
If you get familiar with the reports you can pull, and get familiar with just keeping a little bit of a record of what you're selling, how much it's costing, is your bank account going in a good direction? Is it not? And if you have that separate bank account for your business, it'll make life just so much easier. You don't even have to bookkeep like constantly. You can just do it once a week, once a month, even. It depends on how busy your business is, but as long as you're just keeping tabs on it, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, yeah. I tell people to just kind of develop some type of process that you're comfortable with, or some type of routine, whether that be monthly or weekly. I do like 2 or 3 minutes every day. Just categorize my transactions or whatever, and it's just
Yeah.
always done.
I would do it just when I'm shipping because it takes a second for like the item to like label to pull up. So I would just type in my spreadsheet real quick, find the item, go, okay, this sold for this much and shipping was this much, and it'll tabulate my profit, and that's it. I mean, if you just, it's kind of like anything, right? Like if you just maintain it a little bit each day, like laundry, if you
Oh,
just do
geez.
it a little bit each day, and you get to that habit, it's not this overwhelming mountain you have to take
That's a
care
good
of.
analogy.
Yeah, right? I don't know. Can you tell I have some laundry sitting
Yeah.
in the dryer? And it's so enlightening. That's why I know pretty comfortably my average net profit after everything is 55%, because it just is historically based on I've kept my spreadsheet for so long of my gross numbers. I can look at that. This is what I'm probably taking home, and that's before taxes. We see a lot of gross sales numbers being thrown out in the reseller community sometimes, impressive numbers that are like, wow, I can't even imagine that amount. What is like the reality you can kind of delicately share with us about those numbers? It's maybe I mean clearly I'm setting up like it's not always what it seems, right?
Yeah, I mean, it can be, it is impressive that someone's grown their business to 6 or even 7 figures of sales, because that requires, a lot of work. Yeah, a lot of times those businesses they may not even be profitable. They might be losing money. I mean, that's been the case for some of my clients where I've helped them with their clean up their books or whatever, and they didn't have good visibility into their business. They didn't know if they were profitable or not. I just did somebody's taxes who they're in the 7 figures in terms of sales for the year, and I think their profit was like 35,000 or something like that.
Wow.
Great to be profitable, but that's a really slim profit margin. So to look at that and be like, man, we're putting in all this work, we're doing all this volume, but we only made $30,000. I don't know. For a lot of people, that's great. An extra $30,000 in the year. But
Right.
for somebody who's doing a million, where hopefully they're getting like, I don't know, 20%. I get, it depends what model they're using. Are they doing like wholesale or FBA, or are they like sourcing stuff? It's their thrift stores, those. So you want to like compare your margins to like industry standard. Like I try and target between 20 and 30% because I do Amazon FBA primarily.
Uh-huh.
So for me, 20% is good. 5%, I'd be a little disappointed. Obviously, if I'm losing money, I'd be disappointed. But yeah, like as you're saying, those numbers that people throw out, if they're just throwing out sales numbers, like don't be impressed, but not that impressed. Be like, okay, but how are you managing your costs and all that stuff? Are you profitable?
Yeah, like you said, it is really impressive to look at somebody's business model and see 7 figures in sales, but it's just not the whole story. We don't know employees, we don't know software, we don't know, warehouse costs or insurance they're paying. Like there's just so much. It can be a game of comparison sometimes. We look at I'm only selling this. Well, I should be focusing on this. And we start to like want to try everything, right? But the most important thing is, are you profitable for you? Is it going in the right direction for you? Do you like your business? Do you see it going somewhere? Like it's all is very individual to your situation. Don't get too distracted by huge. It's awesome. It's exciting. I love my huge seller friends. I'm in awe of them. But like I have my path that I'm going down, and that's okay. And they have their path. And some people don't want to deal with employees or don't want to deal with a warehouse or thousands of items of inventory, or with that comes thousands of returns. It's a lot to manage, thousands of customer service emails. So like stay in your lane, grow at your pace, right? Would you say that's I don't know, my 2 cents on that?
Totally. Yeah, that's one thing I try and highlight is just like have clarity on what your goals are, because I mean, some people sell just because it's fun, but most people want to make a little bit extra money because they have some goal that they're working towards. So when you think about that, yeah, help you kind of stay focused.
I believe you do private label, if you do wholesale, if you do retail arbitrage, you do have to kind of look at those numbers and make sure that they're making sense for you.
I'd love to have more sales, but really I'm okay with it because it's not something I'm putting a ton of time into. Like that's not my primary goal. I mean, I like doing it, but really it just keeps me in touch with the community. It helps me know what other people are dealing with,
Yeah.
keeps my feet wet or whatever. So I don't anticipate doing a ton of work unless it really starts struggling. I guess that's my point. Like for me, that's okay. Like I know what I'm trying to do.
Some of the years that I grossed the most money, I made the least.
Mm.
And now with my focus is more in tune and aligned, I make more and more each year. And it's just I'm growing the things that I'm passionate about, and it's been great. And so I would just encourage anyone to do that. Grow what you're passionate about, even if it takes time to sharpen that axe and to like get prepared or prepare something or do something that isn't paying off right away. It's worth it if you have a long-term vision for where it could go. That's I don't know how sorry, we went on to a tangent, not about taxes, but I'm passionate about that. QuickBooks can be really daunting. What do you see resellers doing if they don't use QuickBooks? Would you recommend QuickBooks? Kind of give us your rundown on that.
Yeah, I mean that one's tricky. Like, I tell people it all depends on your comfort level. So your bookkeeping system can be anything from a pen and paper to a spreadsheet to a simple bookkeeping program like GoDaddy bookkeeping is one a lot of beginners
Yeah.
use, to like a full blown, like more robust bookkeeping program like QuickBooks Online, or there are a bunch of others too. Something like that, I think, is the best if you're growing and you're serious about your bookkeeping and you want to be able to run financial statements and stuff like that. But if you don't have any experience doing that type of bookkeeping, I just see a lot of people sign up and they're paying a monthly subscription and it just gets out of balance or just messed up really fast. Yeah, I just see that so often. I have a hard time just telling everybody going out to and purchasing QuickBooks. I would start simple, and then as you grow, at a certain point on your tax return, you have to show not only a profit and loss, but a balance sheet. Like you have to report your assets and your liabilities. So that's the case when you hit a certain level as an S Corp. And in
Yeah.
that case, it's nice if you actually are using a program like QuickBooks, which can generate a balance sheet for you, which is something a simple program like GoDaddy Bookkeeping can't do. So, like, yeah, just like as your business grows, maybe consider upgrading to a more robust accounting program, which
Yeah.
for most people I talk to is not necessary in the beginning.
If you scale up, something like QuickBooks might be a good idea.
Yeah, and I mean, you could have somebody help you set it up. Like you could hire a bookkeeper. It's just complicated because there's so many options. It is. I sympathize with beginners because it's like, okay, there's like so many companies I could hire. Are they charging me fairly? I could hire somebody in India maybe for like $3 a month, but I've seen that end poorly as well. So it just depends. You've been talking about my Reseller Tax Academy course, but I'm working on like a beginning bookkeeping course as well. That's just kind of like
Yay.
sort of a starter, not like super in depth, but intro course that should make somebody at least kind of have better context if they do choose to use a program like QuickBooks.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that would be so needed. And really, I mean, if someone wants to just bare bones start, a good start would be just your free inventory sheet that you have. It's a comfortable way, an easy way to just at least start with something. What would you say your course helps resellers with when it comes to their taxes? How do they feel empowered?
Yeah, that's it. Empowered, peace of mind. If somebody told me that people like lost sleep or were terrified or had all this anxiety about taxes, I'd be like, okay, I think you're exaggerating a little bit. But I've talked to like dozens of people who literally tell me they're literally losing sleep. Like they're so worried about, their taxes, that they don't have the right records, that the IRS is going to penalize them. I think that's the biggest benefit of just going through this course. What's the reason for all that stuff? Like what taxes are you subject to? What are the deductions you should be looking out for? How should you be keeping records? Like, how do I clean up a tax mess? Really, like all the stuff you need to be doing throughout the year that are going to ensure that the tax savings are already in place when tax time comes around. Because an analogy that I just started using is when you're talking about going to the dentist, what if you don't brush your teeth all year? And you show up for your dental appointment, there's only so much I can do to help. Like I can minimize some of this damage, but I can't undo all the stuff that you failed to do during the year. Yeah, being aware of what you need to do throughout the year so that you find yourself in a tax optimized situation. And the bonus is you're going to feel that empowerment and peace of mind. All that energy that you were expending stressing about that aspect of your business, you're going to be able to like refocus that into activities that actually matter and drive your business to the next level.
I think people just when they're losing sleep, it's more they just aren't they don't know. It's that unknown that I think is the scariest thing. But once you start to arm yourself with that knowledge, it's so like not even that scary. And it's yeah, like you I loved the brushing your teeth example because that's a very simple thing. Flossing, right? That you do every day, and you're probably going to be good to go with your teeth at the dentist. And that's really how it can be with your reselling, with your bookkeeping, your taxes, and your finances. You can keep track of a few things, arm yourself with that knowledge. Know as you're going, oh that like I'm expecting this sales tax payment, or I'm expecting this quarterly payment, or I know that this is coming. I know about what I'm going to pay. I don't spend everything that I have, so I always have X amount of money in the bank. I know like about this time of year, we pull that money and we get ready to pay, if we true up our federal tax payments. So it just helps what's coming up, what to expect, what the deadlines are. And as long as you know that and you're armed with that information, it really isn't scary. When you have his guide, you also have the Facebook group, right? Where you're available to ask questions if people have them. Can you elaborate on that, like the additional support that they get?
Yeah, so you get access into the Facebook group that's affiliated with the course. Yeah, I answer all the questions in there. I try and have like a monthly question and answer session. So it's not just like you're enroll in the course and you're sort of left alone. Like if you have questions, I'm there to support you.
Yeah, 100%. There's no one will be left hanging, and I promise, like, there is no scenario Mark hasn't seen and doesn't know how to at least approach this a problem with you. I took Mark's course years ago, and, like, when I very first started doing reselling, I didn't know. I'm not the Mark of my relationship. I'm not the TJ is the one who's, like, very detail oriented, and I was just like, woohoo, sales, money. What am I finding? This is so fun. Let me share it. And that first tax season was scary for me and an eye opener. And we had a few arguments, and there's a lot that I needed to like get together. And that's like what I came away from Mark's guide with, was this empowerment of, okay, this isn't scary. And now, like I was telling Mark before, we have everything prepared and ready to go for taxes this year, and it's not even scary, and it's not even a big deal. And like, we know exactly what to give our CPA, and we know that we've been pulling payments all year long. Like, it's just part of my business, and it doesn't have to cause that fear. I think too, like, people might get scared of, how much do I owe? And I've been spending it as I go. As long as you understand what you're going to be paying and you have an amount saved away, it just is very nice to know you're okay. And that is profit, and you can spend it on the trip without feeling like, is that tax money? Like, I like knowing that we're going to, Disneyland whenever it's safe in the near future. I know that, like, oh, that is my business money. Taxes have been paid on it. We're good. I can like go have fun with my family with the money that I've earned, and everything is like kosher. Whereas if you're just kind of spending that eBay check as soon as it's deposited, that's a scary place to be. So I can't recommend it enough. It's the best product that I've ever seen when it comes to arming yourself with that tax reseller knowledge, and it's helped my life. So that's why every year Mark hops on my channel and we talk about it and we promote it, and it is discounted right now, you guys. So from January 18th to the 20th, it's discounted. It's most steep discount throughout the entire year. $100 off, and it's only this time window. I mean, it will be slightly discounted in the days after that, but if you've been on the fence, this is your time to jump in and get it. Do it. Do it. Just do it. Thanks again, Mark, for hopping on to my channel. I'm so glad to have had you on. We've talked about some really great things. If you guys want more knowledge, more of a comprehensive answer to your questions, you know exactly where to get it. It's in the link in my description below. Mark, any last words for everyone in the audience?
It's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be fine.
I love it. Yes. I'm
Yeah.
currently, my kids and I are reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I don't know if anyone's read that, but it says in very big, calm words, don't panic on the front. That's kind of what Mark's guide could have, the words, don't panic right on it. It'll be okay. Thanks again. Thanks for coming on. It was so fun to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. Always super fun to be here.
Mark has a channel, you guys, also. If you want more information, I will link it below. Thanks, Mark.
Yep. See you later.
Okay, bye.